And if it turns out that more women respond, then, your stats coming from that is going to be biased. But you already know the portion of men in the actual sample versus ideal sample, so you make correction. Similarly, probably younger people would be more interested compared to older people. You can make corrections for different age groups. To the extent you have an observable characteristics that is potentially different in the actual population versus your sample, you need to correct for those. If you, at a minimum, it reduces your sampling error, and B, it actually reduces sampling bias, because your survey instrument may not be able to capture the target population. Sometimes you do a convenience sample. If I want to know something about my students' opinion about something, I'm going to use my own students, since I don't have quick access to entire EKU students. Well, my own students may be different in character. For example, if I wanted to ask, should we require a laptop for every student? If this is a class heavy on finance and accounting majors, more than likely the answer would be yes, compared to a class that is heavy on, let's say, English majors. Again, there is nothing wrong with either one, but that's the data. But then, if I look at my sample, if it's mostly finance majors, I need to correct for that. So I probably have some other majors as well. That's the idea behind comparing your target population versus actual sample. Now, on Wednesday, most of the class, if not all, will be here. I want to actually talk about your surveys, and I want to give you guys feedback. One other issue is framing of questions. Questions, to the extent possible, should be neutral in emotions. Since I talked about volleyball, you go and ask people, do you think having a girls volleyball professional team is a good idea? What do you think is going to happen?
It's going to be biased.
Huh?
It's going to be biased opinion.
What kind of bias do you think? Is it biased towards saying yes versus no? This is independent of gender and other stuff. No, tell me what your opinion of that bias is. It doesn't have to be right or wrong. What do you think the bias is going to be?
It's like whoever has the voice.
Are they more likely to say yes
Yes.
compared to no?
I mean, if you ask me a service.
Or are they more likely to say no?
I would say it's most likely to say yes.
Especially in Western societies, there is a built-in social bias called acquiescence bias. When you ask people a question and they're not necessarily sure what their attitude is, if it's a yes and no question, they are more likely to say yes. Odd enough, do the same thing in a place like Russia, they're more likely to say no. Their default answer is no. Yet. You even see this in true-false questions in exams. In true-false questions where the correct answer is true, this is independent of topic. students typically roughly get 80% correct. When the correct answer is false, that drops down to about 60 to 65. Okay? It is called acquiescence bias. If you're not sure what the answer is, you say, oh, it should be true. I mean, there's also a kind of cognitive reason behind that gap. It's called cognitive fatigue factor. In order to recognize that something is true, all you have to do is recognize it, right? 2 plus 2 equals 4. But if I tell you 2 times 5 is 13, you need to come up with a reason why that is not 13. One thing to do is, 5 plus 5 is 10, so it's not 13. Students with higher cognitive skills go through more reasons compared to students with lower cognitive skills. And they say, oh, I thought of 1 or 2 things, I can't find a reason why it should be false, hence it must be correct. Students with higher cognitive skills, they are more likely to find the reason. And I actually did a paper on this. I have these exam types. It's called confidence-based exams. Not only you have to tell me what the right answer is, but you also have to tell me how sure you are of that answer. And there are incentives and penalties. For example, on a 10-point question, if you get it right and you were fully certain, you get 12 points or 12 and a half points. If you were fully certain but you were wrong, I give you -5. Not only you get nothing for that question, you also lose 5 points from other questions. But there are also lower levels. For example, you can say, I'm somewhat certain. For the right answer, you get 7.5. For the wrong answer, you get 0. That means students, when students are fully certain, the role of cognitive acquiescence bias is relatively limited, should be limited. When you look at the differentials, when they're fully certain, the difference between the two, where the answer is true versus false, is only 5 points. When they are not fully certain, the difference is about 35 to 40 points. It just bottom drops out of it. When they're uncertain, they say yes. Of course, half of the questions are indeed false correct answer, so they fail. So difference of those differences is a measure of acquiescence bias. Turns out it's about 15 points. And I did this in 3 different topics. CIS, personal finance, 4 different topics. Corporate finance and accounting. It was always between 13 and 14 points. So it's kind of a universal number almost. That kind of stuff applies to surveys as well. So to the extent possible, avoid questions that has only yes and no answers. Okay, you can avoid yes, no when possible. Ask something like Likert scale. For example, strongly agree to strongly disagree. And in the middle you have agree, neutral, disagree. You can also implement these things rather easily. For example, using Google Forms. Let's see. I'm going to try. I'm gonna add new Google form. In any survey, it's always a good idea to give a good description of what the survey does. They should have an idea what they're talking about. But let's do a question. For example, linear scale, okay? 1 to 5, and for label 1, let's see how that looks. You just give them that. I mean, 1 being strongly agree, 5 being strongly disagree. Which one do you pick? Or you could directly give them all the labels. It's always, let me mention this as well, then I'll send you guys home. It's always a good idea to ask, for any question you ask something similar, but change kind of the framing. I can ask, do you like Barcelona as a football team? One question, strongly agree, strongly disagree, and the other one I'm going to ask, do you like Real Madrid? Okay, trust me, anybody who strongly likes Barcelona should be strongly disliking Real Madrid. If you know anything about European football, they're like Yankees versus Red Sox. You can't find a Red Sox fan who would actually like Yankees. So if they give conflicting answers, those people either A, are trying to screw with you, or they're kind of filling those surveys willy-nilly because their answers are not consistent. Then I would get rid of those. Some cross checks like that. But since you're going to have your candidate surveys next time, I'll give you guys feedback on those, and you can revise it based on those. Okay. I'll see you guys Wednesday.